들리는 분 있으십니까?
C'è qualcuno là fuori?
C'è qualcuno là fuori? Benvenuti al Christian Podcast.
어서 오세요. 이 세상에서 마지막 레이디오.
Cheers.
Hey, 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 hey,
Hey, hey, hey, hey, hey, hey, hey. That is right. That's right, my friends. So, we're live from coffee shop Lion and the Lamb Coffee Roasters here in Costa Mesa. And this is what's going to happen today. This is a special episode because we're in 2021. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the 2021 review. And then we're going to do 2022 forecast. So our predictions of what's to come this year. And it's going to be amazing. So are you guys ready? Yes, sir. So I couldn't do this alone. And if you're watching on Facebook, then you know I'm sitting right next to somebody. And I'm going to introduce him to you guys. And you can see he's wearing a mask because I just had COVID. And he's probably thinking, I'm going to avoid getting COVID again. So we'll talk about it because that's going to be our 2021 review part of it. But David, welcome to the show, my man. How are you?
What's up? To clarify, I am wearing a mask to be socially responsible.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
To be socially responsible and to follow the Bible says, you know, love yourself, love your neighbor like you love yourself. So I'm loving my neighbors like I'm loving myself.
I thought you were going to say I'm following CDC guidelines.
That too.
But no, you went with the Bible. Okay. I can't say anything about that.
I'm following CDC guidelines because they know everything about us. No, I'm just kidding.
They know. They know, man. Okay, so welcome to the show. And David, you're my long time, many years friend, especially my years here in the U.S.
Yes, sir.
And you're one of my good friends that I've been lucky enough to have as I experienced the American anything, the American nightmare, the American dream, the American fantasy.
Everything.
It has been all over the place. So
the American nightmare. Okay.
All of it. I'm lucky enough to call you friend, and I want to introduce those who are listening to a little bit of who you are, because I want them to feel like, okay, 2021 we're reviewing, but I want them to feel like we're friends.
Right.
We're talking among friends, and we're just reviewing a year, the good and the bad. So, David, tell us a little bit about maybe how we met and who you are.
We met in 2011. I was still a newlywed when we met. And a mutual friend of ours, whose name is Abel. Saludos, Abel. Abel, if you're listening or you will listen to this, hello to you. Shout out to you. You had been at that point in a few years in a band named Signa. With an S, not with a C. And Abel talked to me and told me, hey, Beto, Signa, is looking for a bass player. It was a moment of transition. Abel played bass, but he was moving to guitar, which is his main instrument. And one of the members of the band had moved states. And so the band was in transition. And you guys needed a bass player, so that's how I met Beto. I met him in Abel's mom's garage, where we used to practice.
We were a garage band.
We were a garage band. And and that's how the friendship started. I just came and played, and then I think like a week later we were playing at the Galaxy Theater, now known as the Observatory.
Yeah. Those were fun times.
Those were fun times. And I forget who we opened up for, but we opened up for somebody.
I think one of the first was Babasónicos.
Oh, it might have been them. Yeah, it might have been them.
So it's a band from Argentina. Super cool band.
Yeah.
We were lucky, man. Back in those days, we got to open for like pretty good amount of awesome bands.
Right.
No,
I was watching the just, sideway a little bit, but I was watching, there's a documentary on Netflix, so go watch it if you like rock en español music, but it's the history of rock en español. And I didn't grow up listening to rock en español. But like
Because you were born in the U.S.
I was born in the U.S.
Right? Your
Yeah.
parents are from Mexico.
My parents are from Mexico. I'm first generation, so born here in the U.S. So my parents were born in Mexico, grew up there. They came to the U.S. and had me and my sisters. And then I saw in the documentary they talked about Babasónicos.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was just like, oh, shoot, like, that's kind of cool. Again, not growing up in that culture, you kind of like, oh, okay, cool, Babasónicos, whatever. But then you're like, oh, no, they were like a major band in Argentina and in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I grew up here in the United States. I was born in Santa Ana. Representing Santa Ana. And if you don't know anything about Santa Ana, go Google it. Go Google
Santa Ana, California.
In Orange County. And grew up in church. Like, so I didn't even grow up Catholic. As I grew up, my parents were already Christians. They converted here in the United States. My grandmother, my uncles, my aunts, everybody.
America was doing like the good work.
Back in the 80s, back in the 80s, they were.
We were a Christian nation.
It was the Reagan years.
Always the good
years.
old Reagan years. Hey, just parenthesis. I was watching the movie, the Ghostbusters, the grandkids edition.
Oh yeah,
the latest one.
Oh man, yeah.
And in one of the parts, they talk about like, yeah, it was the good old years with Reagan or something like. But they mentioned Reagan is like those were the good years, like the good Christian years.
Ronald Reagan, the actor. Those
Anyways, you were saying, bro. You were saying.
So so that was kind of part of my upbringing too. That my friends grew up Catholic, but I didn't. I always kind of was like an odd man out in that sense because I grew up in a Christian household, and they're like, "What the heck is that?" And so, anyways, now I am the worship leader at Palm Harvest Church, and me and Beto actually work there, serve there, and we both did worship. Beto does all the media stuff. He does his podcast. So long story short, we've known each other for a long time. Our wives know each other. Our families are friends. So it's been quite the journey of this friendship, and it's been great. It's been awesome.
Love it. Yeah, it's been great and awesome. Well, what an introduction, man. I feel like there's been so many years. But let's particularly focus on 2021. And I want to say this, for people that are tuning in, this is a special episode for me, and this is hopefully the kickoff of something new for the Christian podcast. As many of you know, I started Christian podcast during the pandemic, like 2020. Oh, that's right. That's the year like we established, actually went with my wife, and we made it like a legit business. Right. We haven't made a cent. We actually, we barely paid off our debt because we bought the website and whatnot, christianpodcast.com. But it's been an amazing journey, and I feel like we're barely starting now we know kind of like what we're doing, and we're starting it like 2022 with a better vision, I would say. But all that to say, as I look back, I'm like, wow, 2020, what a year to start anything.
Yes.
Right. And then 2021 came up as a lot of people were just like, I just want 2020 to be over. Like, people couldn't wait enough for 2020 to be over, because 2021 had all the promises of, I don't know why a lot of people felt like, okay, once January 1st comes, there's not going to be a pandemic or something like that, right?
Right.
That was, I don't know why, but people thought,
New
Year, everything's right. And in a sense, like we saw, a little bit of progress with the pandemic and stuff like that, where things were better, right, overall. But nonetheless, it's still been quite a year too, right? So as we review a little bit, and then we're going to do a forecast at the end of the episode of what 2022 is going to be like, okay? But before we go into 2021 and review, I just want to say this. Sometimes people, when they listen, I don't know if they might feel a little bit like, because I've seen the analytics, and people tune in from everywhere in the world, mostly from the US, but there's people from the UK and people from like all over the place. Even this year, as I saw the Spotify Wrapped, I saw that I had people tuning in from Australia.
Oh, nice.
Right? So it's pretty cool. I guess English speaking all over the place. But some of the things we're going to talk about maybe are mostly like US events.
Right.
And I don't know, like, especially when I lived in Mexico, I remember like looking at the US and seeing, and I'm going to tell you a phrase.
Okay.
But I remember looking at the US and thinking, okay, that's in the U.S., but no, what's going on in, like, I knew what was going on in Mexico.
Right.
And that mattered most
Yeah.
to me, right?
You live
And that's
there,
that's the fact with news. No,
Yeah.
if there's local news, you're going to pay way more attention to that.
Right.
Right. So people tuning in from Australia may not really tune in for like, okay, what happened in the U.S. in January or what happened to the U.S. in March.
Okay.
Right. So if you don't relate, send us a message. We want to know what happened in your
country,
vicinity, in your country,
in your
right?
city,
in your city, and what was like the highlight or the low light of your year. So we want to hear from you. Check out christianpodcast.com, and that's that. You know, I just wanted to say that. But then I have a phrase that this is a Mexican author, and I forgot the name, but it's a pretty famous Mexican author. Non-Christian, right? I know we're in a Christian podcast, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a non-Christian,
Right.
and that's okay. You know, I love reading. And he said something. I mean, there's this phrase. I don't know if you've ever heard it,
Let me see.
but it's very typical in Mexico. It says, you know, you live whatever in Mexico, and the phrase goes like this: Mexico, so far from God and so close from the United States. Have you ever heard that?
No,
Not at
but
all?
that's pretty accurate, probably.
What do you think, man? What does it stir in your mind when you hear that?
Well, I mean, it'd be interesting to see where he got that from. I don't know. I haven't been to. I've been to Mexico recently, but it's been to the border, and the border in Tijuana might as well be a whole different country from Mexico. Places like Guadalajara, where you're from, places like Mexico City, where my mom's family still lives, because it's a border town. But you kind of get both cultures. So every time I've been to Mexico, I feel like Mexico is a place of. It's not just a place. I guess Catholicism would be like the main religion, but it seems like people are into so many different things. Like a lot of people are into like La Santa Muerte. A lot of people are into like stuff like that. Like even some people are into like Aztec type things, you know.
Yeah,
You know what
that's
I
true.
mean?
Yeah.
You know. So it's like, you know, so it's
Like I just saw a post on Facebook from actually when we were, you know, doing Signa,
okay.
this rock band. I don't know if you remember this guy from, I think his name is Edgar. Ah man, I forgot the name. I think it's with an E. I think it's Edgar.
Shout out
But
to
he's
Edgar.
he's in San Diego, and he's the guy with Rockeros.
Oh yeah.
He had a show on Rockeros.net.
Right. Yeah.
And his show was featuring bands that all the time people are like, who's that, right? Because he featured like Signa and all these bands that are indie that nobody knows. But anyways, he was posting something on, like, I don't know if it was a meme or if it was actually like a real post, but it's in something like, I'm not celebrating Christmas, I'm celebrating, I forgot, right? But it said like Huitzilopochtli or some Aztec god. Or something like that. I'm like, okay.
Like something super, just like, okay, that's random, but cool, bro. Like, that's awesome. You know that.
Exactly.
So
So there's
like,
a lot more of that in Mexico.
Exactly. So I feel like that. And then obviously, like, so close to the U.S., not just because we share a border, but I feel like a lot of U.S. culture infiltrates Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Probably more than any other country. Maybe Canada, too, because they border each other, too. But, like, you know, you have U.S. culture all over the place. But I feel like Mexico just, like, opens hands to, like, anything the U.S. does. Mexico's like, aquí, I receive it. You know?
Some people call us malinchistas. I don't know if you've ever heard that. But
Yes.
So malinchistas, for those who don't know, there was this woman named La Malinche when the Spanish conquistadors came to Mexico, like back in the 1500s. And she was an Indian who kind of like learned Spanish pretty quick. And she was a translator. And then a lot of people accused her of being a traitor to like Mexican culture and Indian culture. Because I think she ended up marrying like a Spanish guy. But also, you know, like, hey, you were an Indian and you kind of like betrayed the whole Indian tribe thing from Mexico because you became a Spaniard. Right, in a sense.
Gotcha.
So nowadays, when somebody says malinchista, it means like, okay, you adapt to the colonizer, right? Quote unquote colonizer, in a sense, like super quick. So they say that of Mexico like all the time, you know, when people are like, okay, I go and get my Starbucks or I.
Es un malinchista.
Right, you're a malinchista.
It's funny because I first heard that with soccer, with football. Like listening to so me and Beto are huge soccer fans. And we don't get it here in the States, so I have to YouTube it. So I'll get like ESPN Mexico. So I'll listen to a show called like Fútbol Picante or I'll listen to a show called, La Última Palabra on Fox Sports Mexico. And so the first time I ever heard that term was that, malinchista. And it was Hugo Sanchez. Hugo Sanchez, he's Mexico's greatest soccer player. He's one of Real Madrid's greatest soccer players ever. And I remember him telling the Mexican press, ustedes son malinchistas, because they're always like, you guys are all for foreign players and all for foreign coaches, but not the Mexican players.
Wow.
So you guys are malinchistas.
Oh, that makes sense.
So I'm like, that's the first time I ever heard that word. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if that concept exists in other countries of the world. Like, do you see the U.S., people from Australia or Europe? I guess Europeans are like, we're European.
Right,
right. But I don't know if people adapt in other countries like so quick to, whatever the U.S. offers culturally or technologically or whatever. They adapt. Like I remember in Mexico, we grew up without McDonald's. And that's one of the first things in the 80s, like we received the very first McDonald's in my city. And everyone's like, wow, what is this, right? So we were like buying what are they called?
Big Macs?
Big Macs, yeah. So it was a whole thing. It was like, wow, the U.S. is finally, because before it was like, if you wanted a Snickers or one of those chocolates from here, it was hard to get them. It was like somebody came and brought them. You couldn't find them at the store. Now they're everywhere. There's Walmarts, there's all kinds of stores, right? And you can buy basically almost like any product from the U.S., you can get it in Mexico, more than likely, right? Yeah. But this is the 80s. So anyways, that's a little bit of backdrop history of growing up in Mexico. That's pretty fun. So let's move on to 2021, January 2021. Mr. David, what is one of the highlights for good or for bad that you think happened? And I already know kind of what you're going to say, but what was the highlight of January 2021?
The insurrection. That comes to mind, that happened in the White House and people storming the Capitol Hill and breaking in and they had to put the whole place on lockdown. And we had the picture of that guy that looked like a Viking to me, and he painted his face
with the horns.
And then I think it was one guy sitting in Nancy Pelosi's desk and putting his feet up or whatever. And
like he's in command.
He's in command, and
wow.
So that's like the first. I think we came out of like a historically bad worldwide year, especially in the U.S. And then just to come in and see that, to like somebody's trying to basically almost like overthrow the government, which here in the U.S. in Latin America, I feel like that's always been normal, dictatorships, or in Mexico, for example, in Mexico, I always like to think of it, there's like a democracy, quote unquote, to the public, but obviously we know who all runs things, and I guess that happens in every country, but in the U.S. you're not used to that, because I think people here think, I used to think like, oh no, politicians here, they shoot straight. And obviously now as I'm older and adult, and I'm like, oh no, well, obviously politicians and governments have their own agendas. But you're not used to that here. So I think that really freaked people out, and that really made people sad, and that made people angry. Because obviously for those of you guys listening, there's this huge tribalism going on right now in America. You're either you're either left or right, you're either blue or red. So just to see that in the beginning of the year was kind of like, okay, I've never seen that, especially here. I never even thought that would happen, especially here. So we kicked it off with a bang.
With a bang, yeah. And that was the month where Biden became president, no?
Yeah, he was going to get inaugurated, I think, like a couple of weeks after that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's usually like January 20th.
Something like that, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so if you had to choose an emoji out of my 5 emojis, which I'm wearing the hat of the blasphemous one, and I have blasphemous, skeptical, what's in the middle? Holy, inspired, that's in the middle. Holy and divine. What emoji would you use for January?
Do you have the angry face emoji?
Well, that's kind of like the blasphemous. They're really emojis like for belief.
Yeah.
So that's why they don't necessarily transfer. But if you had to choose a faith emoji or a belief emoji, which one would you choose?
I'll choose the blasphemous one.
Okay, so January was blasphemous. Okay, perfect. And what we're gonna do is at the end we're gonna give you the average of how the year went.
How the year went
with
based
an
on
emoji.
based on emojis.
Yes.
Because that's how we roll.
Okay. So February comes along, and that's usually the month of friendship and love,
Of course.
right? Was that the case? 2021.
For me personally, of course, I'm. Me and my wife.
Lots of sex.
We don't talk about that here.
Okay.
Let's see. What happened in February? So much goes on
Yes.
that you're just like, what happened?
It's been quite a year.
It's been quite the year. What happened in February? Beto, I know you have a thing right there. What does it say that happened in February? I'm gonna look.
Let me check. So I'm checking on. Excuse me, I'm eating a bagel as we do this too.
Which is quite good, by the way.
So a chronicle of the January 6th attack, coronavirus, Omicron means for the country. Health experts hope that the vaccine would halt the spread of COVID-19. It didn't. Well, I guess the expectation was we have a new president,
Right.
right? It's the country that the quickest developed and distributed the vaccine to its citizens. I would say the U.S.
The U.S.
because there's other countries that we're still waiting for it, right? And
I would say between China, the
Yes.
U.S. and Russia, because I know like in Mexico they had Chinese and Russian vaccines,
yes.
right? Sputnik.
But people were flying to the U.S. to get vaccinated because
Right.
it was available.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of crazy. But the expectation was we're going to get better. And I guess eventually we realized that kind of helped,
Yes.
but not quite. Or what do you think about the vaccine? Do you think, I mean, well, I wanted to wait till we get to, what was it, September? When you got COVID?
July.
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 Why? Okay, we'll wait till we get to July to talk about COVID in your life. And that's going to be a blasphemous
month.
month.
But it said
right?
here, let's see, in February, it said here that the number of vaccinations administered worldwide exceeded 100 million. So in February, 100 million people worldwide were already vaccinated, or at least had their first vaccination for the COVID-19. Which that caused a lot of controversy because obviously we have a very anti-vax movement and people getting very, offended if, or there's certain people that just don't like the whole masks thing and the vaccination thing, and for many reasons, which in my opinion, I think a lot of them are based in conspiracy and not actually like.
I would have chosen, if I would choose an emoji for mask wearing and all of that, I would have chosen a skeptical emoji.
Right.
But nowadays, it's so weird because I feel like I'm still skeptical, but I already had COVID and I already kind of like witnessed that the vaccine does help.
Yeah.
But still, something about it just feels so weird that I'll talk about it later. But
Cool.
anyways, okay. So February, most of the world got not most of the world, but a lot of the world started getting vaccinated.
Got vaccinated in February.
And still, people were debating whether they should or not get vaccinated,
which is understandable. So, like, even though I'm for, and we'll talk about more about the vaccines later. I even though I'm for people getting vaccinated, I understand where they come from, where they're like, I don't know about that, because of, again, we'll get into it a little later. So, if you want to go into March.
Okay, so February is what? What would you say if you rate? And also, I mean, February is the month we kind of like, well, especially in the U.S., it's called like the Black History Month.
Black History Month,
right?
Yes, sir.
So did that go smooth, or was there any? Do you remember anything happening? Because I know 2020 was like George Floyd and all of that.
Yeah.
Did that stir anything in February?
I think in the last few years, I think that has obviously been. I remember in school we always did something for Black History Month. We learned about Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and if you don't know who these people are, you can Google them. We learned about Harriet Tubman and these very influential people in African American in history, really, in American history, not just African American history. So I think in these last few years, February, that's been more prominent. Like you've seen more of an awareness of it and a more of I don't think celebration's the right word for it, but maybe that word will fit. But just I'll say awareness, an awareness of Black History Month, an awareness of the contribution African Americans have made to the United States, you know? So I think there's definitely more awareness to it now. And 2021, coming out of a very, very sad and violent 2020, you know, especially towards African Americans, I think in 2021, again, the Black History Month coming around, you kind of be more aware of it, and you I guess you think about it more. Like, I mean, me personally, you know, I think about it more. I have a lot of, you know, African American friends, and you really start to just think, you know, and also not only that, but just, you know, Beto and I, for those, I mean, I don't know if you can tell or notice, but we're both Hispanic. You know, Beto was born in Mexico. I was born here in the U.S., but I'm Mexican American. When you find common ground with other people of minorities, you know, you find common ground because you face similar things, you know. And not that I'm comparing myself to you know, to the struggles of anybody else, definitely not. But you find common ground, and you kind of like, you start to understand each other. And I think for me, these last few years have definitely been more like, man, you know, the African American community in the United States, unfortunately, goes through a lot, and they've been through a lot, you know. But I have hope that we can keep pushing forward and things can keep getting better for everyone, for every minority here in the U.S., you know.
Perfect. So now I don't know what to rate it, because I was already thinking, okay, February was the skeptical month. We didn't really know how things were going to turn out. But now with that you just talked about, I feel like, okay, I might give it an inspired emoji, or even like we're talking about holy territory.
Yeah.
Which one would you choose?
I don't know. That's hard because I'm a glass half full, not a glass half empty guy. So
okay, so you want to
maybe
just give it an inspired?
Inspired because people were getting vaccinated,
okay,
and because, you know, hopefully we're being more aware of other people and their cultures. And
perfect, you know. Inspired emoji.
Yeah.
March comes around. What was March? Is that
March Madness?
Is that Easter? Was that Easter or was that April?
That's April this year. I know sometimes Easter's in March. It just depends. Let's see.
March Madness.
March Madness, of course, happens every year.
So what happened in March?
So it says here that the number of vaccinations administered worldwide exceeded 500 million in just a month.
Wow.
So it went up 400 million in just a month.
Wow.
So a lot
that's
more
massive.
That is a massive.
Okay, so that's the month my dad got his first shot.
Okay.
In Mexico.
My mom
I think he
too,
got the AstraZeneca.
Okay.
And then he started speaking Russian. That's when we were doing the memes about
drinking more vodka,
getting the vaccine, and then people are like, "Hey, I feel totally okayiski." Yes, okay, especially the Mexican memes, because those Mexicans can meme, man. Right?
Yes.
The Mexican memes are the best. If you guys don't, I wish you guys have more Mexican friends so that you can get Mexican memes on your WhatsApps and your chats, because they're hilarious.
Right.
Okay, so more people getting vaccinated. And did anything else happen worldwide that you think? Something I was going to say about February that I forgot is kind of related, unrelated, but no, we'd love to talk about this throughout the year. Was somebody got canceled from the Mandalorian show.
Oh,
the wrestler, what's her name? I forgot her name right now.
No, I don't think she was a wrestler.
Tina Carano.
Yeah.
Right? Or Duna Carano? Tina?
I think she said something about anti-masks and
something like that on Twitter, and then she got canceled. I think she used to be an MMA fighter or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
So, wrestler.
Sorry, you can correct us too if you tell us what she actually did.
So, I guess throughout the years, there's been a lot of cancellations.
Right.
So, also, if you remember of any of these months, somebody being canceled, that would have been... That's kind of fun to remember.
Well, I feel like everybody was getting canceled.
Everybody, right? At some point. Okay, so my dad got canceled because he got the shot.
Did he really?
Yeah, got canceled by me. Like, Dad, what are you doing?
I thought it was like, did he get canceled in like his community, like at the church? Like, the first one.
I'm just kidding. But no, my dad was like, when are you going to get the vaccine? Like, get it. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get it. And then, no, he got the 2 shots March, and then I think in April.
Yeah.
and all of my family, because most of my family in Mexico, we have a chat
Right.
on WhatsApp. So they were all, telling me and
Yeah.
my wife, like, when are you going to do it? When are you going to
Yeah.
do it? When are you just pushing, like, come on, you got to do it, like, sooner than
Right.
later. And eventually we did, but it was like September, I think, when
Oh,
we got
really?
the first shot, like
Wow.
way later. But anyways, okay, March. What would you rate March in the emoji world land?
So remind me again, what were they? So they were the blasphemous, they were the hopeful.
Skeptical, blasphemous, skeptical,
Skeptical.
inspired, holy, and divine.
You want to go with skeptical?
Let's go with skeptical.
I-
Skepticism about getting vaccines, not knowing exactly how it's going to turn out, but more people doing it. Okay. April. April is the month, the kids' month in Mexico.
April showers bring May flowers.
Okay.
That's an old.
I didn't know that saying.
Yeah, that's April showers bring May flowers. Anyways, that's
April Fools?
April Fools.
Okay, that's totally skeptical right there.
Let's see. I have here. So I'm on Wikipedia for those, and I know Wikipedia is not super reliable, so please don't
this
think
is
it's
the best place for
because nobody's never lied on the internet.
nobody.
Nobody's ever lied on the internet.
Excellent.
And it has a bunch of things that happen all over the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me some.
So, for example, where are we in April? So Russia warns NATO against sending any troops to aid the Ukraine amid reports of a large Russian military buildup in its border. So obviously that's something that happened worldwide. Russia's kind of been interfering with the Ukraine, and obviously, that's not good. Let's see what else here.
I have my sympathies for Russia, man. I feel like after what was it, the Cold War,
Yes.
right, in the 80s or the end of the 80s
In the
or
early
the
90s,
70s,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I feel like Russia hasn't had that prominency in the world. Do you think? I mean, when I grew up, like
Yeah.
in Mexico, like it's U.S. And again, I don't know if it's
Yeah.
the saying that I said at the beginning. We're just so close
Right.
to the U.S. That I feel like, man, I wish Russia did better. Can I say that?
Can I say Russia? Well, I think in terms of culture, like pop culture, I think the U.S. Beats pretty much almost any country in the world.
Yeah.
Although I've learned that Mexican pop culture is very popular in Latin America in general and worldwide.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Mexican has a lot of its own culture that's very popular. But I feel like, for example, and I'm sure China and Russia have their own pop culture, but it just doesn't get, I don't think it's as well. So I think Russia does play like more on the political aspect and more on like being a world power. I think most people are like, hey, don't mess with Russia.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of like pop culture, probably not, because I can't think of anything
That makes sense.
pop culture related from Russia recently. If you guys can think of something, please let us know. But I can't think of like off the top of my head right now.
Yes. No, I think that's totally accurate. And also, when you say Mexico has influence in Latin America, I remember the soap operas called telenovelas,
Yeah,
right, in
right,
Mexico.
right.
There was one by Thalia, who ended up getting married to the famous musician.
The
What's his name?
Sony guy, right?
Tony something.
Yeah, Tony Motola.
Tony Motola. Yeah. Anyways, she would have soap operas or telenovelas,
Yeah.
and they were, to my surprise,
They were
when I
huge,
found
right?
out that she was super popular in Asia.
Oh, yeah,
I was
that's
like,
right.
what
yeah.
the heck?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was like, no, people were like, oh, I can't have enough of like Maria Mercedes
Yeah.
and Thalia and like all these soap operas from Mexico.
Yeah.
They're super popular, and I don't know if that's still the case. I think because now
Yeah.
I think, in general, like Asia has done way more like,
Right.
pop culture or has
Yeah.
resurfaced with their
Yeah.
own themes. Even like on Netflix, there's a lot of shows that now
Right.
confirmation stuff.
Yeah.
So I think they're doing better, that they don't really need the Mexican soap opera,
Right.
right? But
we were
that's
talking about that,
exactly
yeah.
not the case with Russia.
Yeah.
So come on, Russians.
Russia produce
Right?
a good Netflix show.
Right. I guess also the language is just, it's gotta be, like if
Well-
most of the people, it's easier to learn English, then okay, I'm gonna learn Russian and then speak to who.
That's true. But 3 years ago, they did host the World Cup. So that was,
Yes.
that's I'm like, oh yeah, off the top of my head, that didn't happen obviously in 2020, 2021, but in 2018, which is not that long ago, they hosted the World Cup. And I think that was one of like the first times in recent years where they really opened the doors to the country And I think it's still one of the most financially, if not the most financially successful World Cup.
Wow.
And I think the most watched, if I recall.
Wow.
And I remember a lot of people saying how like they had really good experience for the majority. I'm sure somebody had a bad experience, but I guess in general, most people had a pretty good experience in Russia. And because you know how like with World Cups, if you guys didn't know, you have to.
I know
prepare
somebody
everything.
that had a bad experience. I'll tell you right now.
Okay, but for the most part, you know. But you know how in World Cups you have to have your infrastructure has to be like impeccable infrastructure, not just of stadiums, but hotels, roads, public transportation, airports, all that. Like FIFA, like make sure it has to be first world, you know.
Yes.
So I guess from what I heard and read was that Russia had all that down to like the best.
Wow. Okay, so yay for Russia in the World Cup. That was amazing. So my friend Manuel, who's a YouTuber, like he created like the most successful Spanish-speaking soccer YouTube channel ever. It's called Cracks. And by the way, I have an episode with him in Spanish if you want to check it out on our Spanish stream.
Like butt cracks? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, let me do that. Teet, teet, teet. Here we go. Too late.
I'm just
Anyways, he said he went to Russia and the only thing is like, man, the internet sucked. And also, because he needs to upload daily, right, for his YouTube channel. And it's like the internet sucked. Yeah. And then like the labels on the streets is like I couldn't figure out because it was in Russian, then maybe English, and he's Mexican. So I know he speaks English pretty well, but I don't know how many of the signs were translated to Spanish, right? So maybe they were translated to English. That at some point he got lost a couple times and whatnot. Yeah. So that was his only like, man, that was not the very best World Cup for me, you know, for his very own experience. But that was the World Cup. Mexico beat Germany.
That was a highlight.
So that was a highlight for Mexicans.
And it was on Father's Day too.
Man, just for that, when was the World Cup? That was last year?
2018, 3 years ago.
Wow.
3 years
okay,
ago.
We can't give emojis to 3 years ago.
Sorry.
I wish I could.
Yeah.
Because I had a divine emoji for that.
Oh, but okay.
So
here's another
April.
thing.
So what should we give April?
Well, here's another thing about April that might not give it such a positive one.
Okay.
And this is again going back
blasphemous.
Again, this is unfortunately over COVID. COVID's been the big subject of these last 2 years.
Yes.
But it said here, the global case numbers approaching a second peak in India reported 315,000 infections within 24 hours. Yeah, I do remember India had a humongous spike, if you remember, in April of like COVID. Kind of like similar to like Italy. Italy in the beginning of the pandemic, remember that? They were just like they were getting hit hard with it. India was. And I think also I read here, let me see, that the COVID cases reached, the global death toll for COVID surpassed 3 million.
Wow.
So.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, that automatically gets a blasphemous,
That's a blasphemous
emoji.
Yeah.
That's like sad.
Oh,
okay.
is this, wait. Oh, so this happened in April.
That's in April. What?
Okay. 12 football clubs, we talked about this, including 3 from La Liga, leading clubs from the Premier League and La Serie A, agreed to join a new breakaway European Super League.
Yes.
That happened in April.
An elitist league.
Yes, exactly. An elitist league.
Right. Almost like I'm going to say this, but almost like the Nazi league, like the supreme.
No. Don't say that.
Right?
Don't say that.
That's so blasphemous. Okay, automatically April gets a blasphemous emoji for European League trying to do that. It wasn't the European League. It was within the European League. Somebody tried to create like a very elitist league.
Yes.
Right, with the best teams.
The best teams. So they were trying to break away and form their own Super League.
It almost sounds like Calexit.
Or like
Did
Brexit.
you ever hear of that?
Yeah,
or Brexit.
Or Brexit.
Yeah. Where it's like, we don't want to be a part of the U.S. anymore. It never happened, but...
It never happened, but... But yeah, so that happened, and I remember we talked about it because it had... I think at one point, like governments had to start to get involved because football teams in Europe... and
yes, they move a lot of money.
They move a lot of money, you know? So the leagues, the Premier League, which is regarded by many, and I think so too, it's the best league in the world. And then La Liga from Spain. So these were all the top leagues in the world, like, you know, Germany, Spain, Italy, and England. And I'm not sure if France was involved. So all these elitist teams, you know, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester City, United, all these teams, you know, wanted to create this Super League. And all those teams move a lot of money. Like they
Yes.
generate at this point probably billions, in a year.
Totally.
So
Easily.
it caused outrage because it's like, football is for everyone. It's not just for the rich, it's for everyone. It's a global sport. And what impacted me the most, I think I sent you a link, was that James Corden, he has a late night show here in the US. He's from England. But the fact that he talked about it, and people in the audience were like, what is he talking about? Because here in America,
What the heck is soccer?
so here in the U.S., soccer is pretty popular now, but it's not like as popular like in Mexico. Mexico soccer is like, and everywhere else in the world, soccer is huge. Like here in America,
Yeah.
it's big, but the NBA, MLB, the NFL are still front page of the the sports pages more than the MLS or the the national team. So when he tried to explain it to people, he was very upset about it. He tried to explain it, and everybody was kind of like, "Oh yeah, yeah,
Whatever.
whatever."
That's true.
But everywhere else, everybody was like, "How could?" And I think there was even like protests outside stadiums, and people starting to withdraw. And FIFA was like, "We're gonna, ban these players, and whoever's playing in the Super League can't play in the World Cup anymore." And like, it was just
I remember that. And it ended up not happening, right? Because they thought, okay, there's more value in not doing this. So that tells you who controls like governments in Europe, right? Soccer controls Europe. Narcos control Latin America. And Google and Facebook control the US. Am I super accurate?
I don't think so, but like, let's just say maybe.
Okay, let's give it an skeptical. Okay, we're going to have to move fast through May, June, and July. So May and June, let's just be arbitrary. What do you want to give those?
May, June.
Should we give it like towards better or towards worst?
I don't know.
Okay, let's just give it an inspired.
Let's give it an inspired.
Okay, it's a chance for the world to reset, to move the needle on any direction.
All right.
And this is going to help the overall average of the year. July comes along, and that's when you got COVID?
I got COVID, man. Yeah.
Okay, that's directly going to the blasphemous.
Yes,
Then
I did.
August came along, and what happened in August? That vacation time? That summer?
That summer.
Okay, that's got to be one of the nicer times of the year.
I know some stuff happened. Let's see. Let's.
I went to Yosemite, so I already want to give it a divine emoji.
Nice.
Because
that's good.
If you guys have ever been to Yosemite National Park in the United States, in California, one of the nicest places on earth. It's so beautiful, and I just want to say this: when I went for the first time, my middle son was 3 years old. So imagine 3 years old, and we're driving through the valley in Yosemite, and he looks outside through the sunroof.
Wow.
And he says, "Mommy, this place is beautiful." Like, those were his words at 3 years old. He uttered the words, "This place is beautiful." Because, I mean, there's just beautiful tall trees, blue skylines, humongous rocks. It just looks amazing. The water's pristine. There's a river that runs through the middle called Merced River.
Right.
Just so beautiful. So every time we go, it's like, man, this place is unbelievable. So I'll give it a divine emoji because it's vacation time.
Yeah.
And it's summer, and I got to see good places.
Right.
What would you give? Did you find anything?
Yeah, well, we had the Olympics. Remember, they were postponed from 2020 to 2021 in August.
That's divine. That's pretty cool.
Divine. I mean, it had its controversies. I won't super get into them just because I don't know
What were
all
some
the
of them?
details. Well, I know that one of them had to do with, I think, the Prime Minister of Japan or somebody involved in the government making some, I believe, like some sexist remarks. So I think he had to be removed from power.
Wow.
Again, I won't elaborate super on it because I'm not sure and I don't want to get
You
anything
tell
messed
us
up.
what happened in Japan.
Yeah, right. And then I think there was also one of the American gymnasts. I think like a lot of people are, that were struggling with just mental health. And again, I just remember that, but I don't want to divulge super into it just because I don't know all the details and want to give wrong information or anything or speak out of place. So I know that happened too. And this year, these last 2 years have been a huge mental health awareness. I've seen that grown
Yes.
You know, a lot in these last few years. Because it's affecting a lot of people. It's a lot bigger than I think a lot of people thought it was. You know, I think a lot of people just brushed it off. And I say a lot of even church people would always brush it off, but we've started to find out that that's really affecting even us within the church, you know, pastors, other church clergy.
I think last year or this, so this year that is just finishing.
Right.
It's the year with a lot of people quitting their clergy positions.
Right.
Right. So pastors or people that work, youth ministry or whatever.
Yeah.
Just saying, like I'm reading a book that I'm gonna have the author come on the show next week or in the coming weeks. His name is Brian Sand with a Z, and he was saying that there was this pastor who after Easter in 2021, like he preached the sermon on Easter, and then the next day he retired and he said, "I'm done. That was my last message. I don't want to know. I don't want to have anything to do with Christianity anymore. It's like it's over for me."
Right.
Like wow, right after Easter,
right.
which is supposed to be like one of the highlights of. For a Christian, this is this ultimate celebration, right? Like the resurrection.
And then he's like, I'm
done. But anyways, July, you said July was the Olympics?
August was the Olympics.
August. Yeah. Okay. We're going to give August, I would say a divine, because I think the Olympics are amazing. And I even had an episode with an Olympian, a Paralympian, that was just so good. And he went and competed in Japan. And he was on the... what's it called, the wheelchair rugby team, and he was the lead of the team. And anyways, that podcast episode is amazing, highly recommended, one of the probably the best episodes of the year, one of the highlights of the year for me, talking to people, because it was just so inspiring, you know, that this guy had an accident, was paraplegic, like couldn't walk anymore at 19. Imagine like in the in the prime of his life, like when he was doing good in sports, like doing good in school and whatnot, and then all of a sudden he's in a wheelchair.
Right.
And then even though he had like all this like health issues, he still pushed through to become an Olympian, right? Like to go to the Olympics, like for the 4th time or something like that, and be the captain of the team. So I was like, it was so inspiring. It was one of the best episodes.
Right.
So go listen to that. That was a highlight for me. So I'll give it a divine. September, kids go back to school. For me, that's a big win because kids back in school. That's always good. And then my wife started working, so it was a highlight for us that we started paying our debt. So it was really good.
Let's see what else happens.
So I'm going towards giving it a positive. September 2021 was amazing. What do you say? Do you find anything otherwise, or even in your own life? You recall September?
Well, just September. We won't get into it because it's a long story, but I don't want to bum anybody out. COVID was hard. When me and my wife got COVID, we were both in the hospital. She was in the ICU, and it was hard.
Dang, we're going from divine to all the way to blasphemous.
Well, but in September, we spent most of August in recovery. And September was kind of like one of the first times where we started feeling normal again. I don't know what everybody's experience with COVID has been, but when we got home from the hospital, we just felt weird and out of place. So I think September for us personally was a month of like, okay, we're starting to kind of feel normal, and we're starting to kind of, even though we're dealing with still some things left over from COVID, like just, we saw, God's faithfulness,
Ooh, that's good.
And so I felt like September was like, okay, we're moving forward, in the midst of, and here's the thing, in the midst of all this chaos, and I know we're brushing off a lot of the things in the year. There was a lot of things that happened. A lot of people went through a lot of serious stuff in 2021 that we're obviously not covering today. And definitely, I don't want to make anybody feel like we're brushing that off, because we're not, but in the midst of very dark things that unfortunately happen in the world, and one of them was I almost lost my wife to COVID this year, and a lot of people lost loved ones, through COVID. A lot of people had, again, just in the whole scope of the world beyond COVID, people have just gone through some really serious stuff. And so, you know, this is just, I guess, just to reach out to everybody, you know.
That's good, bro. I think that's when, you know, when we we have 3 more months to discuss, but I think those will go easy because those are super recent.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, you had COVID, and I think no, you were in the ICU. Like, I had COVID and I was home,
right,
you know, for like 2 weeks. I lost my sense of smell.
Right.
I lost my sense of taste.
Yeah.
And to me, that's when when I was saying at the beginning that I was going to talk about this.
Yeah.
My conspiracy theory senses spike up.
Right.
But let's remove conspiracy and whatever.
Right.
Right? Just the fact that there's a virus that can shut parts of your brain off.
Yeah. That's
And
pretty
you know,
crazy.
I mean, you have a headache, and then the next thing is you can't smell, and then the next thing, you know, you have a headache, and the next thing is you can't taste.
Right.
If you think about it, those are 2 of the 5 senses of the human body.
Right.
Right? So imagine if somebody, I mean, the most obvious and evident would be like, imagine if you couldn't see anymore.
Yeah.
Right? If that virus would have affected
Your
you know
eyesight.
the receptor of your brain that shuts your eyes, right? And then you can't see anymore, how would you feel?
Right.
Right? Probably way worse than you know, not being able to taste or smell. But nonetheless, just because these 2 senses are in a sense like we can live without them, I would say, no. But nonetheless, it's 2 senses you're losing. And I feel like that created, you know, when you're talking about like this mental crisis, you know, that the world is facing. To me, that was one of the hardest part, you know. And I'm not minimizing, like, you went through the ICU. Your wife was told, you know, brace yourself because this might be it.
Yeah.
Right. And you guys are in different rooms in the hospital, like not knowing what she was going through. I mean, that's got to be hard. That's got to be like one of the most. Right. You probably had the most questions in your life. You probably had the most intense times in prayer.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, that's probably one of the worst cases, or no, people died of it. Right. But on the other side, imagine like what I've experienced, it kind of opened me up a little bit to more empathy towards people. Like, hey, losing 2 senses is not just whatever.
No.
Right? Imagine
sucks,
it was your eyes that you lost.
With your head.
Right?
Yeah.
It messes with your head.
Yeah, it messes with your
and
head.
some of it is coming back,
Yeah.
but even the fact that it's not back completely, and not for everybody, right? Like, people's cases are different. Some people get their senses back like right away. Sometimes it takes longer. Like the coffee we just had, I think it tasted like 80% for me. Like, I have 80% of my taste back. My smell, it was kind of gone because I used to work in construction back in the days, and it kind of messed up my sense of smell anyways.
Yeah.
But now it's almost like 99% gone.
Yeah.
So it's hard to smell.
Yeah.
It's getting back a little bit. But anyways, imagine what that does to people, like, mentally. Like, you're losing a big part of, you know, how your body reacts to the world around you. Yeah. Right? Like, the other day my wife was cleaning and she's like, I can't even smell like these chemicals. You know, before I would be like, hey, I gotta be aware of these chemicals I'm using because, you know, it's gonna mess up with my head.
Yeah.
And now she's using them, not feeling anything.
Right.
Right, but still probably causing stuff in your brain, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was using a Sharpie and I put it close to my nose. Like, I can't even smell this thing, you know. And usually they say don't put a Sharpie close to your to your head or your face. So things like that, where imagine people that work even in the food field,
Right.
and they're maybe a cook, and they lost their taste and smell. Right. Is their food gonna suck? Right. I mean, how are they gonna taste? How are they gonna make sure like, hey, I'm providing like a quality product to people?
This year, you know, so when we got COVID, my sisters are my neighbors. They live above us, so we all got COVID at the same time. So this year for Thanksgiving, my sister always makes her famous mac and cheese. And she's just like, hey, can you come and taste it? Because she still hasn't gotten her full taste back. She's like, hey, can you come in? And this is from August, you know, from July, August. And now we're in November for Thanksgiving. And she's like, can you come and taste it? I didn't lose my taste. The only thing I got is everything was really salty, you know. But going back to what you said, that it messes with your head, it does. You know, like me and Tanya, especially my wife, has been going through some PTSD because of that, you know, because of what we went through. And again, it's been a hard year for everybody. So all these things, and just the things that we've, you know, we live in a culture now where a lot of things get brought up. So everybody's gone through some hard stuff, you know. And so COVID is definitely one of those things that, like, you know, like now that you're experiencing it messes with your head because we're not used to it, you know. I know some people who got COVID and started losing hair.
Yeah.
You know, and then me and my wife started reading about it, and we're like, the virus is so powerful that it starts, you know, your body needs everything it can to fight it, that it'll start shutting off other parts of your body that it doesn't need to survive. Like, you know, like, oh, you can survive without growing more hair. We need that part to fight the virus. So people started losing, you know, hair. And that can also be very depressing for people, you know.
Yes.
I can imagine, especially for women who, you know, or people in general, you know, it just, hey, losing hair, losing taste, losing smell. Yeah, so it's been a hard season for a lot of people.
Yeah, imagine,
you know?
imagine just as humanity, like
Yeah.
after, we're going to go into the predictions, but imagine, 2030 is like, okay, people don't smell and they don't have taste anymore. Like, right.
It's a
I mean, I'm not saying
yeah.
it's going to happen,
Yeah,
right?
but it's like, yeah.
imagine something like that happen. And like when people say, I don't know if you've ever heard like with evolution, that some people say, oh, I remember when I was in junior high, somebody like was teaching us about like evolution, and not to minimize creationist, okay, because we're in the Christian podcast, but what I loved about my school is that, hey, there's creation, there's evolution, whatnot, like they offer this whole spectrum, right? But in one of them they were saying maybe one day humans are going to develop a fifth finger, like another pinky.
Oh, like a sixth finger.
Yeah, like a sixth finger. So you would have another pinky next to your pinky.
Huh.
So, no, actually, you were gonna lose the pinky.
Okay.
I think that was what they were saying, because
like
the pinky.
Simpsons?
Yeah, like because the pinky doesn't really help that much.
Huh.
So they were gonna say, eventually when humans evolve, they're only gonna have 4 fingers.
Like the Simpsons.
Like the Simpsons. Yeah.
Like the Simpsons.
So, anyways, all that to say, imagine people would evolve to like, now we lost our sense of smelling or taste because of COVID, like as humans.
Right.
And that would be kind of depressing. But my hope is that even as we are, as humanity, I would say, right, as humanity, we're experiencing COVID and like the loss of taste and smell, that how they say when people are blind or when people are have a deficiency in one of their senses, they develop one of the other senses even more. So my hope is that in this season we develop a sense of empathy for each other more.
Yeah.
So not in a sense a physical sense, but a sense of like, can we have more empathy for one another just as humans, because we're experiencing kind of like the same thing in a global scale.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking of with that, now that you brought it up? Because people always talk about like revival, and I feel like a lot of people think that revival is like we're all going to be in a room singing worship and this crazy like falling of the Holy Spirit, and that's like revival. I always, in my head, I'm like, I think like Jesus was one of the biggest revivalists ever, but Jesus was hardly ever in like a synagogue or a temple. Like he was outside with people, you know, and he was basically doing like a service to the community, whether it was feeding 5,000, whether it was healing people, whether it was talking to people, like he did a revival without having to be like, he was literally a revival because he was with people. And I always felt like like you said, we're growing in empathy, especially now that we're all going through similar things, and we're finding out, hey, you're struggling with this, I'm struggling with the same thing. I think the moment we start being very Jesus-like with each other and with people who don't know Jesus, like we really understand that, like, hey, let's be Jesus-like. Let's not get caught up in these little petty differences that we have, when we start respecting each other and respecting, our beliefs and basically being Jesus-like, then that's, to me, I'm like, man, that's when real revival is going to happen. I don't think
that's a prediction for 2022 right there.
When we finally, I think, can start, and that starts with me, because I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm not
perfect.
I'm sure I've said something dumb in this podcast. Then somebody might tell me, hey, why'd you say that? But
I do that all the time.
But it's a process of being human, and I think that when we can really, if there is no redemption after accountability, then we'll never change. There has to be a redemption road, and I think Jesus is the redemption road. He offers redemption. Jesus just doesn't go, hey, accountability, and that's it, you're out. Jesus is like, hey, accountability, but now redemption, you know? It's like we're forgiven of our sins. And it's like that creates this whole process of the good news of the gospel. There has to be redemption. And I feel when we as people start realizing, hey, okay, maybe you don't want to wear your mask, but I do, but I still respect that. And you still respect me. And we're not like, well, you're an anti-masker and you're an you know, once we get over that and really respect people, or hey, maybe I don't like wearing my mask, but I'm going to wear it out of respect to somebody because I care about everybody. I feel like when we get that Jesus mentality of like, hey, love your neighbor like you love yourself, I think that's real revival. That's real revival, because now we're like, okay, now we're really being Jesus-like, you know?
And you're saying so much there, man, because, I mean, Jesus, to me, Jesus makes the whole difference when it comes to Christianity and whatever, you know, whatever people are experiencing. To me, it's like, okay, yes, Christianity has its flaws.
Of course.
And right now, you know, people are, you know, like the episode I want to have with this guy named Brian Sand.
Yeah.
Because he talks about deconstruction, and he talks about this philosopher called Jacques or James Derrida, like a French philosopher who he was pretty much the creator of deconstruction in France. And there's a lot of people undergoing this, like, right, you know, like I'm saying, like this guy that quit after Easter in 2021, and so many people in the clergy, like, just saying, I'm done with Christianity, or I'm done with God, or I'm done with following.
Right.
I feel like maybe you're done with a part of Christianity that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But are you really done with Jesus? Like, when it comes down to who he is,
good. Yeah.
like, are you, like, did you really wrestle with who he is and who you encounter? Like, I was reading, this guy said that someone was going through, like, the biggest deconstruction in her life. Right. He doesn't say who, but I'm assuming it's Beth Moore, just because it sounded like it was her. But anyways.
Now you're putting it, now we're going to get angry mails. Beth Moore.
Beth Moore. So he was saying that
shout out to
a woman was pretty prominent in the Christian world or whatever, was undergoing like this deconstruction, and all she could read for a big season of her life was the Gospels. It's like out of the Bible, it's like I can't read Genesis, like I can't read anything else other than the Gospels, right? Like right now, that's all I have like the guts and even the energy to really wrestle with, okay, if I'm going to wrestle with someone, I rather wrestle with Jesus than wrestle with Ezekiel or wrestle with, you know, Jonah or Paul or whomever. Like, I rather wrestle in the Gospels with Jesus.
It's almost like there's Jesus, and then there's the institution of Christianity. Because I sometimes feel like they don't fit together. Like, I feel like there's an institution of Christianity, what we have, our Christian culture, but I feel like we sometimes miss a lot of the Jesus part because we're not like Jesus. Yeah. You know, it's like we're human, and you know, speaking for myself, like as a dumb human, sometimes I have my own dumb ideals and my own dumb things that I think, and I try to mix that in with Christianity, and then I have this dumb thoughts that sometimes I'm like, okay, that's not Jesus-like at all. That's just me being dumb, you know, and I can alienate people, and I can hurt people's feelings, and I can, you know, so I feel like there's an institution of Christianity, and I think there's Jesus. So I like what you said. It's like, I'd rather wrestle with Jesus, because you're not wrestling with the institution of Christianity, which has its many flaws, as you said, but Jesus doesn't have any flaws, you know, and it's like you wrestle with him, and it's like a different,
doesn't have any flaws, and yet he's probably one of the most controversial persons when it comes to belief. Right. It's what C.S. Lewis said, you know, you either believe Jesus is a lunatic
exactly,
or he is the son of God. Right? Because when you read the gospel, even when you're saying, you know, like anti-mask and all of that, I wonder if that's exactly what stirred so much commotion back in the days. Like, even when Jesus would heal, because imagine Jesus would heal people and heal in the Sabbath, but not only that, but they had a whole protocol when it came to disease. Yeah. Right? And basically Jesus wasn't wearing a mask when it came to, like, I'm going to touch this person who's going to be healed. Yeah. Right? So imagine what it stirred in people, like, you're not respecting the protocol in a sense. And I guess some people could hijack that to say, there you go, we shouldn't wear masks. Yeah. Right? Like, people can hijack what Jesus did and said, like, to the left or the right, or whichever benefit they want. Right. Even when Jesus says, you know, enough with that, when people are getting up their swords.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, this is the time, right? And the disciples, it says that they grab a sword.
Yeah.
And because Jesus said, okay, let's grab our swords and go.
Yeah.
And everybody grabs their sword. And then Jesus almost like, I was kidding. We're
Like,
not
hey,
fighting like that.
Yeah, like not the,
Right?
yeah.
And then they're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Right? And some people could even hijack that idea for whatever side and
Right.
say, we shouldn't pick up arms. And then other people could say, no, Jesus is saying we should pick up our arms.
Right.
Right? We have the right to bear arms. And
Right,
create
right.
like this whole debate.
Yeah.
So anyways, all that to say, I rather wrestle with Jesus.
Yeah, same.
Right? And what it
Same.
meant
Same, yeah.
in everything. Okay,
Amen.
so let's wrap it up with October, November, December. Let's just arbitrarily give him an emoji.
October's Halloween. Halloween's
That's
big in our house.
blasphemous.
So many people are like,
But it's inspired.
it's inspired. Halloween's big in our house. Me and my wife love she likes ghosts, happy ghosts.
Ooh,
And
the friendly ghost.
friendly ghost.
The Holy Ghost?
The Holy
Hey, the
Ghost.
Holy Ghost.
The
That's
Holy
gotta
Ghost.
be divine.
Still a ghost. Thing divine. So it's big in our house. We like the whole dressing up thing. We pass out candy. So it's a nice moment out of the
Okay.
whole chaotic mess of the world's in sometimes to just
We'll give it an
enjoy
inspired emoji,
Let's
even
be
though some
inspired.
people will consider it even that blasphemous.
blasphemous because they'll be like David worships the devil or something. you
Yeah.
know?
Okay, November. November is the month of gratitude.
Gratitude.
I love that.
Even though I know Thanksgiving now has a very controversial because
yeah.
of the culture that we're in.
That's true.
Has a very controversial
Cancel culture and whatnot.
But to take a time to just kind of be with family and to be grateful, that's always a good thing. Despite Thanksgiving.
I'll give it a holy emoji. We barely have holies. In December, this month.
I got my first vaccination.
Okay.
I'm waiting for my second
I got
one.
my first COVID.
You got? Oh yeah, tell us about that. And how was that for you?
Well, like I said, not too bad. It did feel kind of like a flu, but a little worse because it has the headaches.
Yeah, those are horrible.
But I think it was more like the emotional side of it. Like I was saying, the losing the taste and the losing the smell. It felt like how can like when I hear like where does this virus come from, and somebody said it comes from a laboratory in China or something like that. I'm like, I don't care where it comes from. There's just something weird about it, like
sucks,
being so effective in like being so specific. Like I'm gonna shut down these two parts of your brain through a massive headache.
Yeah. And you had COVID Christmas too, right? Like you
COVID
were indoors.
Christmas, yeah.
Indoors with your kids and your wife.
So that was sad because I love being with my family, but at the same time it's like, wow, we can't see anybody.
Yeah,
that kind of sucked.
Yeah.
So I'll give it a blasphemous. Blasphemous. Man, I think this is going to be the blasphemous year. So altogether we have 1, 2, 3, 4 blasphemous. Okay, so I'm going to put here 4 blasphemous. Then we have skeptical. We have one. One is skeptical, so we know which one didn't make it. Skeptical. And we have inspired. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now we're tied with inspired and blasphemous.
Right.
And divine, we have one. Only one. One divine. And holy, we have 1 and 2. So 2 holy. So this year, 2021,
Let's see.
was mostly blasphemous and mostly inspired. Do you agree?
I mean,
I guess that's life, right? A little bit of both, right in between.
I think the hope, again, not to sound, it is the Christian podcast, but I guess we have, we know what our hope is. So I think,
Hey, there's 1 divine and 2 holies.
There you go.
For the whole year. So
Yeah. So I think
kind of balances it towards the good.
Yeah, I think as a person, if I wasn't a Christian, I think I'd be hopeful because I want to find the good in something. Again, I'm a glass half full, not half empty type of guy.
Yeah.
So I think my hopeful, now that I'm a Christian, I'm like, okay, I'm going to find hopefulness because I still think, we all have hope. Hope is never lost. Hope is Jesus and he's never lost. He's for everyone. But it was a year that was very chaotic. again, there was a lot of things we didn't talk about on this podcast that you guys can go or you guys know about. Very serious things.
Let us know.
Let us know. Very serious things that happened. So it was a hard year for a lot of people. A lot of people of deconstructing faith, like we talked about, personal things, COVID still. So it was a rough year, that's for sure. It wasn't one of those years where you're just like, yeah, great. It was rough. It was a rough year. So 2022.
So 2022, rough 2021 coming out of 2020.
Which was very rough.
Very rough. But glad we're alive. When I think about it, I'm like, I'm 40. And I'm in 2020, like almost in 2022.
Yeah.
Like, who would have thought? We're almost at the quarter of a century.
Yeah.
Already in the quarter of a century. Yeah. And when you think, this is the interesting thing that I love about history, that when you look back, you're like, okay, that happened then. And you kind of see how it developed. Yeah. Like, even when you think of, how World War I or World War II developed, you're like, oh, it was because this happened right here. And then it kind of like, trickle down to boom, war or whatever. But you can kind of see it. And when it's happening, I think it's harder. Like, it's harder to understand what moment in history are we living right now. Yeah. Like, as it's developing, as this year we witness an insurrection to the White House, what is that going to have to play in the role of history, like 10 years from now or 20 years from now? Even something we didn't mention that was massive was like the pulling out of Afghanistan Afghanistan, right?
Yes.
Of the military, right? Yeah. And not only that, but that it was Biden who did it, So, that was already chaotic, and it was probably the topic of like 2 months. Yeah. Right? How the U.S. was pulling out of this war zone in Afghanistan, and there's a Netflix show that I loved watching. Now I forgot what it's called, but it's about the pulling out of Afghanistan.
Okay. Gotta watch it.
Yeah, I forgot. Just look it up on Netflix and Google like show about pulling out of Afghanistan. It's pretty good, and it wrestles with some pretty big questions. Yeah. Some of the guys that were coming back, from the war in Afghanistan, is like, do people even care? Like, do people like? And it kind of gives you the impression of like people in the U.S. almost like living their freedom. What was it called? Like libertarian, debauchery. Not necessarily like in debauchery, but almost like taking for granted the freedom that somebody else sacrificed for. And not really acknowledging like, wow, this is what the soldiers were saying. Do people even care? Do people even value like all the energy and the work and the for good or bad, but just the fact that we are here and they're not. Right. Like, we're doing the job that we had to do, and nobody else is doing it. We are here. Like, do people value that? And that's kind of like the big question of this show on Netflix. It's a documentary, so it's so good. Highly recommend.
Okay, gotta watch it.
Really good.
Like watching that stuff.
Okay, so forecast for 2022. What is your forecast, man? What are some of the? I know, like, I used to listen to this show where they would say who's gonna die in 2022. And I think it was the year they predicted. They forecast. I think Michael Jackson dies this year, and that was the year Michael Jackson died. Like, wow, they were accurate. So they were talking about celebrities and whatnot. But let's be more hopeful.
Well, speaking of that, I just started watching I'm not done with it yet, the new Beatles film that they have on Disney Plus. Get back, and it's I've had a lot of friends comment on it. Some friends are like, it's kind of hard to watch because it's literally just raw footage, and sometimes a lot of the times they're just like playing and not doing anything. But it made me realize we only have 2 Beatles left, Paul and Ringo, and Paul McCartney's going to be 80.
So you think this is the year?
No, I don't. I hope not. That's why I'm being hopeful, because Paul McCartney's going to be 80 this year, and Ringo Starr I think is going to be like 82 or 83. So they're in their 80s now, the Beatles. Wow. So I hope that we still have them for a while, because as you know, I'm a huge Beatles fan and love their music. 2022, I hope for good health for both Mr. Sir Paul McCartney and Sir Ringo Starr. I think Ringo Starr is the Sir. Please correct me, but I'm pretty sure he is.
Nice.
So I predict that. And I also hopeful that this year, again, we've had 2 hard years of not just pandemic, but just a lot of social growing. And I hope that we can continue to grow and be respectful of each other, regardless of gender, regardless of our orientation. I hope that we can be respectful of each other, regardless of political alliances, whether we're leaning left, right. Because and again, some people might be like, well, that's very dumb of you, and you're very, naive. And well, I'm not dumb and I'm not naive, but I am hopeful that at least we can keep growing, and that even though we have differences, that we can be respectful of our differences, So
Oh, that's so good, man. I love it. And I think that's one of my goals with the Christian podcast is, and I was talking with somebody, it was last year, but it was a person who wrote a book about politics, and it was right around, when in the U.S. was the election with Trump and the other guy. And her book was so good, because she was talking about like there's almost like in politics there's left and right, but with Christ it's almost like there's a different realm of politics,
right.
And it's the kingdom of God, right? And she was talking so much about community, but anyways, my point was when she was saying this and when I was doing this interview and reading her book, I feel like I had a vision for a Christian podcast, and it was I want Christian podcast to be a resource of hope and conversation in a non-propositional kind of way. And I think what I meant by that, now when I hear it, I'm like, what the heck? It sounds weird. But I think what I meant is I don't want Christian podcast to be almost like a preachy podcast.
Right.
Where you listen to it and it's like, okay, this is it, guys. Follow these instructions and you'll be set. Even though I feel like a little bit of the Bible is kind of like that, but I feel like at the same time, it offers so much room for conversation. Like the Bible itself, when I follow Jesus, when I see Jesus wrestling with the thinkers, the God thinkers of his time, I think what I love is that they valued conversation, and they talked about the things that mattered. Yeah. Right. So even if it was talking with the Pharisees, and even if they had disagreements, right, at least they were talking about the things that mattered. Right. Right. Yeah. And they were talking about, okay, how is this? I mean, that's almost one of the reasons why Jesus would get upset. Like, I'm healing on the Sabbath. Are you mad that a person is being healed from a disease that's been affecting them sometimes for years? There's
the bigger picture here of just the Sabbath, of just this religious thing. It's
exactly.
Like, hey,
But at the same time, it's like he was recognizing that it was a big deal for them. He was humble enough to say, let's talk. Right. And I love seeing Jesus even talking to the Pharisees, like on the table, sitting with them and telling them their truths. Right. But on the table. Right. Like that to me is like, wow, I want to be like that type of Jesus. Right. And I mean, all kinds of conversations. Like he was talking to Pilate right before he goes to the cross. Yeah. So a Roman official who had the power, quote unquote, to crucify him. And yet Jesus still has somewhat of an argument with him, even though part of the argument was Jesus being silent, and then kind of upset the other guy. Like, don't you know? But sometimes, I mean, I one thing is like, why was Jesus silent, right? And sometimes I feel like some of our conversations need to be more about listening than about making our point across, right? And that's something Jesus showcased right there and then with Pilate. Yeah,
Jesus cared about the person. I mean, even the Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman, the fact that she was Samaritan, that just already crosses these like, social and I guess these like ethnic and racial lines, and the fact that she was a woman, and so it's like Jesus doesn't see gender, doesn't see ethnicity, he just sees the person. He sees like, hey, what is the need, and because he knew everything about her, he knew everything about her. He knew everything about her personal life in that story. If you haven't read it, go read that story. So again, like you said, like the fact, it's hopeful, and I hope that we can sit down at a table and have a conversation, with the key word being respect. We might have different views of things, but like, hey, let's have a conversation about it. Yes. Because you've had on your podcast people who are very like I'm gonna put on the right,
all over the spectrum,
all over the exactly all over the spectrum, and you're able to have these conversations, and I've been able to speak to a lot of people who are very on the left and very on the right, and still have respectful conversations, and I think that's very Jesus-like. Hey, let's talk. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not disregarding you or who you are or what you believe, but let's talk. You know what I mean? And I think if we can do that and not disregard people and what they believe, what they think, you know, and we can sit down and talk, then man, we're winning. You know, that's winning. You know,
love it. Okay, so more of that on 2022, and I just want to say as we wrap up the episode, I'm so excited for what's to come. I feel like I said, you know, me and my wife, we've been doing this other show or stream called El Cristian Podcast en Español, which is basically me and my wife sitting down and having weekly conversations, but then also, you know, kind of like what I do in English, you know, like inviting people to the show and having conversations about faith with God thinkers, but in Spanish. And I feel like, you know, with so many episodes that we've done, I feel like I have a better vision of what I want 2022 to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like a part of what I want to do is I want Christian Podcast to continue to have, you know, amazing guests on the show, you know, people who write books, people who are musicians, people, you know, who are whatever, you know, just people that are God thinkers around the world. Because that's just, I love that part, you know, but I feel like I also want more of David and more of like friendship. Like, I feel like what you have to offer, man, is it's almost like this like cultural approach. Like, you know what's going on in almost like in the day-to-day life, you know, even when you were saying with the, you know, with the soccer teams in Europe, like, hey, you know, this elite Super League wants to happen and whatnot.
Right.
Like people can relate to like the day-to-day. So I want to do that more this year too. Mm-hmm. And hopefully, you know, if you guys are listening and you want more episodes where it feels more like a friendship conversation where we walk through it, you know, reach out to us, go to christianpodcast.com, say, hey, you know, I want to be a part of that, because I feel like it can lead to a community where we can even answer people's questions. We can introduce people's questions even to authors or guests that are going to be on the show. And it can create a community of conversation and of hope. Because I think a lot of people are, you know, I think when I think of 2022, one of my like big objectives is to offer hope to people. And I think most of that is going to happen through conversations, right? It's not necessarily going to happen through, this is it. It's going to happen through listening and through offering, what's the word? I was going to say advice, but it's not advice. There's another word. Offering, well, I can't find the word, but mostly listening. I think that's the bigger premise of Christian podcasts. You know, listening and having conversations with people all over the spectrum. And I think that's why I have emojis. You know, because in a sense, when we talk about the topics of faith, I've been thinking this, you know, as I've done like 40 something episodes so far with people all over the spectrum, like politically and in the religious faith and whatever. And I feel like, okay, faith is a big deal, but at the same time, if I just make it be like, if I become legalistic, right, and say, okay, this is right and this is wrong, even though I feel like Jesus has a moral compass, you know, but at the same time, I feel like he's gracious enough to talk with people and have conversations. So I want to create that space, right? And I want to create a space where people who are even in that, I have a lot of sympathy for people who are deconstructing or people who are, you know, like stripping away their faith or who have, you know, just a hard time with Christianity. I have a lot of sympathy for that. Maybe because I feel like I've experienced it myself. And I could talk about that maybe in another episode. But at the same time, I don't know why it always, like, I feel inclined to people who are skeptical. You know, like I love it. You know, I love people who are on the divine side of things, and I love listening to them too. And I'm like, wow, this is great, and it inspires me and it gives me hope. But sometimes also like the people on the skeptical spectrum, I'm like, wow, they're so. I mean, I can relate to that too, and I think it's just the curiosity side of me, and sometimes even the doubtful side of me. But at the same time, I want to offer hope. Like, I don't want to go through to the skepticals and say, hey man, let's just all go to the blasphemous side and you know, bash on the church or do this type of thing, right? So I want to be way more hopeful than that, and I want to do that through conversation. So we'll do it in 2022. And another big prediction,
Well, I think COVID's gonna keep going.
COVID. So you think we're going to have the booster shot is just going to become the shot, like the yearly
I
shot?
don't know. Maybe, probably. I mean, I think we're in for another, year of COVID, obviously. So I don't know. It'll be interesting because right now I think we're teeter-tottering on the brink of like, hey, maybe we're gonna have to require the vaccine now for everything. You know, like here in Orange County, they're a lot more lenient with it, and I know in LA, they're a lot more strict when it comes to vaccinations and COVID protocols. So I think we're teeter-tottering on the, are we gonna get more strict with that? Are we gonna not get strict? Because I think there's push on both sides. I think there's a push on one side of like, yeah, man, let's all get vaccinated. Let's all, just to be safe. And I think obviously there's a push to the opposite side where like, no, you can't make me get vaccinated, and that's, my right to choose and blah, blah, blah. So I think we're going to see, I think 2022 is going to be a very interesting year to see how that, which way the pendulum is going to swing, whether it's going to swing to like the U.S. going like, nah, it's okay, you don't need to get vaccinated, or a push for like, no, we all need to get vaccinated and travel and all that.
I think to me, it comes down to convenience. If it becomes convenient for people, they're going to do it, even if they're anti-whatever. If it becomes convenient, because I've witnessed that with the whole, the 9/11 thing that happened, and then how people had to go through screening to get on an
TSA
airplane.
and all that stuff,
And now they have, pay a little extra, and you don't need to do the whole TSA, right? You just go directly into the plane. And it's because you have money and you have a pre-screening. And it becomes a money thing, and it becomes convenient. Right? And people do it now people are not complaining, hey, it's my right to get on an airplane. No, they just do it because it's convenient. So I feel like if it gets to that point, then will people just get the vaccine because it's convenient and I can travel, I can do things. Which eventually it makes, this is kind of interesting to maybe for another episode, but how is that going to play with the whole Revelation thing where it says without the mark of the beast, you can buy or sell? Because I feel like, what is that going to come down to in the future? What is the mark of the beast? What does it mean when it says you can't buy or sell? You can't belong to society if you don't have this mark. So that's super interesting. I've always felt like, wow.
It's like setting the stage for it,
Yeah, setting the stage for it. But at the same time, I feel like a side of me doesn't want to be a futuristic dystopian type of believer.
Same. Yeah.
So I don't know, man, but the Bible kind of like opens that up. So I'm like, how can I see this in a different light where it's more hopeful than that? So anyways, more guests on the show in 2022. Awesome times, more emojis, right? This year was a little bit of blasphemous and a little bit of inspired and a little bit of holy and a little bit of divine. And I think that's life. Right, life is like that.
It's a roller
it has
coaster.
all over, but let's make 2022 a great year.
Let's make it a great year.
All right, good attitude, good conversations,
Yes, sir.
good times, and we want to hear from you. So visit us at ChristianPodcast.com. David, what do you want to say? We've had so many podcasts before. Before we had Christian podcast, we were in Hell No podcast. I even had the West Side Network podcast. And you've been part of my creative experience all along. How do you feel? Like just seeing me, like I sometimes I feel like, what does David think of me? Like I'm the guy that suggests, let's do a band. Let's do a podcast. Let's do another podcast. Come on, work at my church. Things like this.
You're just a creative, man. You're creative. You're a creative person. And I feel like this is like the best version of you I've seen. In terms of creativity, this is like the best. You're like at your sharpest. You're at your most focused.
I'm brilliant.
You're brilliant. You're a G. You're a gentleman and a scholar. Well, you are a scholar because you just graduated.
I did, man.
That happened this year.
That happened. Hey, that's divine right there.
Yeah. What did you have your degree in?
It's called Licenciatura en Ciencias y Técnicas de la Comunicación. So translate that. Ciencias y Técnicas de la Comunicación.
Sciences and techniques of communication. You have your degree in sciences and techniques of communication from the University of
Del Valle de Atemajac.
Del Valle de Atemajac in Guadalajara, Mexico.
Yes, that's right. I love it. I'm so thankful and grateful to have been able to finish my degree finally. It's a whole story. And maybe someday I'll talk
Yeah,
about it.
please,
Because it's we can talk about immigration.
Yeah.
We can talk about crossing the border, and that would be fun.
But maybe we can have a multi-ethnical podcast, have the people from different ethnicities
Yeah.
and their experiences here in the United
Yeah.
States and with
Oof.
Christianity. I think that'd be a great one for 2022.
All right. There you go. Man, well, say bye to everybody and invite them to go to check out christianpodcast.com.
Check out christianpodcast.com. Please be respectful to each other, be nice to each other, love each other. We have a lot of negativity. Let's stay positive.